All right, hello, drawing students. Today I am going over the Unit 1 or Major Project 1, Final Major Project, whatever you want to call it, the last big project for the first unit that we've been doing in Drawing 2, primarily focused on line, shape, form, and value. Those are the elements we're looking at, but really what we've been doing is drawing gestures. You guys have been doing that on your own. And obviously here this is for the online course in this lecture. So let's dig in. You've already finished your practice ones, and now I just want to guide you through some like more pointed, more purpose-driven sort of gestures. I'm going to look at the slides first, and then we'll just real quickly look at the assignment on Canvas because it pretty much is the same. Okay, so let me make sure that this looks right. Okay, yeah, good. So we're looking over types of line and shape, and then we're also going to add in a little bit of the elements of form and value. Basically, we're really focused on the element of line and throwing in a shape, and then just touching on form and value because those are important with gesture. But really, at the end of this slideshow, the slideshow is going over those things, but at the end, I'm going to give you the final for this unit, right? Really, what we're going to focus on is expression and mark making. Really, you've already been practicing the proportion, the value, the form, the things that gesture gives you. You've been practicing the technique of gesture. Now I'm going to give you more information so you can be really pointed with how you use the technique to be more expressive in your mark making and be kind of, again, directed in how you draw gestures. In any case, and it's improving. Again, it's a lot of quick gestures. It's going to improve your proportion. It's going to improve your sense of seeing, your observational skills. But it's also, since it's the final, I'm giving you a chance to add in your expression. So first off, let's focus on the element of line. Okay, this is very basic stuff. You probably learned all these elements in drawing one, but it never hurts to reiterate. You also learned them in art appreciation and probably art history too. But in any case, yeah, the first element of our 7 elements of art is line. And the elements of art are basically the 7 things you have to use to make art. It's the literal things, the building blocks, the basics of how you make a piece of art. So shadows, lines, shapes, forms, space, all those things. So in any case, yeah, the base of these 7 is the line. A line is a track made by a point moving in space. It can be where a drawing starts or tie everything together in a work of art. It can vary in length, color, direction. Line is just basically, in a way, it's the most basic way of making a mark because our most basic tools are things like pencils, pens, even brushes, typically have a point to them. And when you drag them across something, it makes one thin line, right? And then you build other things like shapes by closing those lines in or filling in with lots and lots of little lines and all that sort of stuff. So it's the base for the elements, but it is its own element as well. If you've ever drawn, you've probably used line. Um, yeah, and sometimes those lines can be big, sometimes it can be small. There's all different kinds. And you can see here a good example of a drawing that is created using only simple black lines on white paper, and yet you see a form, you see shapes. Really, this is a gesture, right? With lines that built up to add shadows, that then those shadows add form, which we're going to look at later, and they all encompass the shape of a human face and all that good stuff. But yeah, you see how the line is created, you see implied edges and all these things. It's very gestural, actually. It's kind of a good that threw that in there. Now, line type can be straight, curved, thin, thick, applied. I mean, of how you can draw a line. You can draw them dotted, you can draw them zigzag, you can draw them whatever, right? And you can change. One line can have multiple forms of these line types, right? You can have a big straight line that suddenly has a curve and then a little zigzag part, and then it gets thicker and then thinner in the same line, right? So again, it really reiterates that there's an infinite array. Those lines can follow the contours and form and shape of objects, right, to create a sense of actual fullness and form. Again, we'll look at that later. Or lines can be just sort of abstracted. They can flatten things. They can be just outline. They can be built up to add shadows. They can be kind of mechanical or geometric, whatever. But yeah, there's lots of line types, an infinite array, really. And we'll talk more about using line to build form in a little bit. But in any case, when talking about line, there's a few attributes to include. The three that I talk about here are orientation, direction, continuity. There are other attributes you can add to line: modulation, stuff like that. But in any case, implication, implied, all that sort of thing. So the attributes of a line here that I want to talk about, though, are orientation, which basically means, is it horizontal, vertical, diagonal, right? Where is it headed? And then I guess with that kind of goes into direction, the second attribute I want to talk about, because, yeah, I mean, the direction is more like the sense of movement, like which way is it going, where are all the lines pointing you. But a lot of times the orientation is how it does that. So they kind of go together, orientation and direction. But to simplify, direction is movement. Horizontal, vertical, diagonal is kind of the state of the line. And then the last one, continuity, is the flow. Is it jagged? Is it bouncy? Is it dotted? Is it dashed? Is it modulated? All those sort of things. Like, what is the actual character of the line? Because zigzag obviously isn't included in orientation, or there's lots of little orientations in it and all that kind of stuff. So those are the three basic attributes you want to be sure you're familiar with. But there are others. And with those others, implied lines, we already talked about these as a type of line. And a lot of times implication or implied lines have to do with the direction of the line and all that sort of stuff. But in any case, just to break it down, actual lines are visible, continuous marks made in pencil or paint or some other media. That they're lines that you actually see. And the reality is, there's only one actual line out of these four boxes. There's only one line that is a line drawn solid start to finish. The rest are all implied. Okay, and implied lines become very important for people like photographers, sculptors, things like that, and drawers, of course. But basically, implied lines are lines that are composed of sections that aren't connected. So it can be dots, it can be dashes, it can be broken lines that sort of create an edge, right? When you're thinking about drawing things very, very realistically, when we get to value later, you're going to work a lot with lines that create an edge rather than a line that is the line around something. Okay. But in any case, yeah, look here, B is dotted lines, right, that you see create a line. C is lines that just end in a way that they're all kind of going the same way, and then they end at different spaces, so their ends create an edge here. That's very interesting. And then the last one, also implied lines result when the edge of two shapes meet the edge of another shape. This is D is the one that I'm talking about. When you draw things realistically, you don't draw a line around my hand if you see it. There's not a big black Sharpie line around my hand. What you see is the edge of my hand meeting the edge of the wall, where it goes behind my hand. And so you learn to draw those two solid shapes rather than just the line between them. And this helps you get to more realistic or more naturalistic drawing. So it's not just outlined. So D is actually very important for some later lessons that we're going to get. And it is something you want to try to use in gesture making. So you don't just have a big line around the edge of something. You want to create the actual shape and its edge and where that edge drops off to the background. Okay. Hopefully that made some sense. Now, in terms of direction, that was implied line versus actual line. Now let's talk about direction. Lines convey a sense of direction and movement always. Viewers have an instinctive gravitational reaction to those directions. And this is where I was talking about orientation and direction kind of go hand in hand. The orientation gives a sense of direction, which what this is saying gives a sense of reaction, a sense of emotion or expression. So just real quick, I want to say diagonal lines give you the sense of movement or action. Horizontal lines give you the state of quiet, repose, sedate, or calm. Vertical lines are assertive, aggressive, and domineering, but not necessarily moving. The way I like to think of it is a diagonal line. Well, let me start with the horizontal. Horizontal lines, they are calm and sedate because when your body is horizontal, that means you are laying down and things are quiet and still. Okay. Vertical lines are assertive and aggressive because if you're standing at attention perfectly vertical, that means you're ready to make a move. You're sort of solid and like you're not going anywhere. You're like a line of soldiers or something, right? That are very vertical and aggressive. A diagonal line is the shape that your body makes when you are mid movement. So if you start running, your back is going to be a diagonal line. That's just the way that it works. And I think that's why those sense of directions, those reactions to those kinds of lines are that way. It's because it's how your body orients to it. Okay. Now looking at this piece, you can see it's a painting underneath the Big League Brothers Racing, and I've highlighted the fact that all these lines, now there's one horizontal line that's fairly common, but most of them are slightly diagonal and leading you. You should get a sense of things going to the right of this painting. You might get some to the left, like some spread to the left, but they're going to converge over here on the right. See how they're getting closer together? That gives you a sense of movement to the right. Also, the lines on the backs of the rowers, their arms, right? It kind of creates a little bit of a circuit here in the middle. You can move around. And lines are really good for guiding people's eye around things that they're viewing. But in any case, the point here is lines always convey some movement or mood to the viewer. So that's like my basic, like real textbook stuff I want to talk about with line. Now let's talk about other types of line in terms of expressiveness. Okay. Lines that give you like a sense of overall mood. And yeah, here you see some familiar ones from our first slideshow. This hand we had, if you want to go back and look at the hand drawn, it showed like 3 or 4 different ways of drawing a hand, different lines that kind of gave it a different mood. And you can see that here as well in this slide with this cup and pencils. We have a very aggressive kind of sloppy line versus the aggressive, dark, like heavy lines. And either one, they're definitely giving you a different sense of expression and what's happening in the scene of just regular still life objects. But then you see some other things. These are all very gestural drawings. The still life I showed you before of the violin, the bottles and teapot and all that. The figure here, this is actually the top middle right is a sketch by Michelangelo, and you can see the base pose of the person moving, but he's also added some kind of like shadow lines to give this sense of like where they're moving from, where they've been going. Same goes for the top right. It's got a very directional sense. You see the whatever he's sort of riding on and his arms are both pointed to where they will converge on the left, so you get this sense of headed that direction. In all of these, you get a sense of like value being placed in a very dramatic sense on one side to add a sense of weight or movement or direction or value. We'll talk more about value in a second, but yeah, just really pay attention to where the shadows and darkness are added to add expressiveness as well as weight. Okay, now let's talk about the types of line. First off, I'll go through these pretty quick. First off is, of course, expressive. This is really a pretty umbrella term, but I want to talk about that. It's like, it's lines that give you a real sense of mood. And this can be pretty broad, but here, really, what I would call an expressive line is lines that there's a lot of difference a lot of times within the piece. So this is when I'm comparing and contrasting to aggressive, which we'll look at in a minute. There's a lot of modulation. There's a sort of softness to some lines that let them fade back, and then there's a heaviness to some lines that make them really pop out and have that value that really grabs your attention, right? And so some of these, it's kind of expressive line in a lot of ways is like getting a mood at the same time as not using too much, not having too much going on. That said, the one on the right obviously has a lot of expressiveness. Now, I will tell you, the one on the right, I kind of doubt it was drawn from life. It's not my favorite way of showing a gesture. And the one in the middle kind of might be the same way. It's definitely not a person who looked really close, but you do get this sense of kind of goofiness or an off-kilter state of the middle figure, and that's kind of nice. Even if it is drawn from life, it's changed to be off-kilter. But I do want to just reiterate, don't draw from your head ever when drawing gestures. Do not do it. Now, but in any case, yeah, this middle person, there's some shadows, there's a lot of lines that are gone over multiple times to add emphasis, but yeah, lots of variation here. And then yeah, the girl's hair is really kind of a tangled mess, and that in and of itself is sort of an expressive state of lots and lots of lines. Now they're curvy and soft, so they don't have an aggressiveness, which we'll look at in a second. Yeah, aggressive, you probably saw me accidentally click. Aggressive line is the next type of line I want to talk about, and it kind of fits under expressive, but aggressive, I kind of separate it because there's like a certain state to it. Expressive is about lots of different kinds of the weight of your hands. It can be soft to hard, but aggressive, and that difference of soft to hard adds the sense of mood or whatever. But aggressive is just you add the chaos, right? You add lots and lots of lines. It adds a sense of jaggedness, a sense of heaviness. A lot of times you want to do this more with line gestures than necessarily mass gestures. Expressive line, you can use a mass gesture to get that sense of expressiveness. But aggressive line, you really got to be able to build up values. Lots and lots of build up of line, again, and sort of chaotic. This is very much like you might call scribbly. Again, it doesn't mean out of control, but definitely like a build up of line rather than just a lot of line to emphasize value. There's a small difference there, but this is a buildup of lines to show you the state of the mark maker, like really digging in there. But in any case, yeah, that just goes to show you a slight difference. Now, diagrammatic organizational lines, these are not necessarily a moody type of line, but you can think of these as almost like architectural. They are building up the shapes. There are things that you might see, like someone who's really trying to deconstruct how an object should be drawn, like from 3D to 2D, and how it goes away from you, almost like a diagram, right? Like a breakdown or an architectural drawing, like lots of cubes and cylinders for this, so they can focus on, okay, that's this oval up top, and then it has more curve at the bottom because it's lower than my eye level. If it's on eye level, it's flat. If it's above eye level, I shouldn't see the top, right? There's things going away from me. Also, a lot of times you see with diagrammatic line drawings that there are lines that go beyond the edge of the actual forms that they're drawing, and that's to give you this sense of like, oh, it actually is done to help with sighting, so you can compare the top of objects, the top of this one to the middle of this one, the top of this one to the edge of this one, right? All those extra lines help you with orientation and direction or sighting, but it also just gives you a sense of that which direction those lines are creating a sense of movement and all of that sort of stuff. This is sort of like sketchy line, and it's sketchy not to create a mood, but it's sketchy to create a sense of direction, movement, depth, right? A sense of architecture, right? A sense of buildup. Now, mechanical line, I don't really want you to super think on this one a lot with gesture, but it's one that I like to throw out there as a type of line. This is like just very straight, regular, like very consistent lines, right? They don't change thickness a lot. There's not a lot of modulation to it. A lot of times I always say, if you want to draw a mechanical style drawing, you want to give a mechanical vibe, bust out a ruler. That's how you should draw it. All that sort of stuff. It's a lot of, again, like engineering, very modern equipment, almost like steampunky, but it's very flat in nature. So it's not great with gesture, but I do want you to know that it's a type of line out there. A contour line, again, not great to say that a finished gesture is contour line unless you use a lot of modulation like these hands. These are pretty gestural in nature, but the problem with contour is that it's mostly outline and then an outline of the inner shapes. The whole point of contour is you don't show a lot of shadows and highlights, and obviously that's not great for gesture. So it might be a good baseline for a gesture drawing, but it's good to know. Contour lines, just to give you the essence, I usually give it as a separate assignment for drawing one, but for drawing two, I'm just reiterating that contour lines are lines that follow the outer edge of something to give you an outline, and then also follow inner edges and inner things, so that with just a sense of line, you get a sense of 3D. With just line, you get a sense of 3D, where it's moving towards you, where it's moving away from you, all that sort of stuff. And you modulate the line. You have to stay super true to the original that you're seeing, even when it gets a little goofy and all that kind of stuff. Now, that's contour. Lyrical line, this can be used with gesture, but at its most basic, it doesn't have anything to do with gesture. Basically, lyrical line is when you have the original form in the middle or figure, and then around it you give some extra repeated lines or repeated motifs, repeated shapes, so that you get this sort of rhythm headed out to the edges of your paper, or there's just a sense of movement around things. Again, can be helpful for gesture, but in itself is not a gesture, but something to think about as we look at the different moods and things. And then, of course, I've already talked about implied. We looked at this gesture before, how the back of the figure is not actually there. There's an implied sense of line, the implied line of these, the interruption in these horizontal lines in this middle picture give you that shape of the hand, that silhouette of the hand. Not really a very doesn't have a lot of depth and form. And then here with this drawing on the right, there's a lot of implied space, implied fingers, implied hands, feet, but there's enough line that there's a sense of value on the back. So that you get the shape of the person. You look at this and you know it's a person, even though there's a lot of lines left out. That's implied. We know this already. Now, very quickly to go over shape, because it's important that we reiterate this as the element that it is. This is the second element usually talked about, and it's basically the two-dimensional space that a thing takes up, right, on the picture plane or whatever. It's if you draw a line around something, even if it is 3D, things that are forms, things that are 3D also have a sense of shape, but the shape itself is not 3D, if that makes sense. So basically, let me talk about, it's the two-dimensional area or plane that may be closed or open, organic or geometric, found in nature, made by humans, that is taken up by a drawing, okay? So yeah, you look here, like this is the Rubens vase. The shape you see is this flat vase. Now, if it were the real vase, you would see the light and shadows bouncing off of it, and then it'd give you that sense of coming towards you. But that's not what we're talking about here. Shape is just the flat space, the flat two-dimensional space it takes up. Now, the types of shape are organic and geometric. Just to reiterate that, it's basically natural shapes. Things from nature are organic, and then things that are geometric are made by man. And I'll reiterate what those are in a second with another slide. But real quick, I also want to talk about positive shape and positive shape and negative shape. Now, you'll hear it called positive space, negative space a lot. The reason I have this word art with the question mark is because I think personally for me, positive and negative belong in both the shape category, the shape element, as well as the space element, which we'll look at later. But basically, the positive shape is what's there, the negative shape is what's not. Okay, we've already talked about this with gesture, so we'll reiterate that again in another slide. Okay, anyway, geometric basically means mathematical concepts like circles, squares, triangles. They are man-made is the best way to think of it, because we've defined the shape, right? That is geometric versus organic or biomorphic. Biomorphic is like just a more pretentious way of saying it. It's objects, lines, shapes, or forms that seem to be drawn from nature or evoke living forms of nature, irregular as opposed to geometric. They are not symmetrical, they're curvilinear, they're bouncy, they're not balanced, right? This is like real life, things that are asymmetrical. All of us, we're all asymmetrical. Everything made by nature is not perfectly symmetrical. And so we give this its own category. It's not perfectly regular. Now, figure and ground, just to talk about, figure is the shape we perceive as the dominant shape we detach and focus on. Usually it's a human, but it can be objects, I guess. And basically it's another word for positive shape. A positive shape is what is there. It's the thing you are seeing. The negative shape is all the empty space around it, or if it's a negative shape, a lot of times that's like the space inside. I think I've used the analogy before, maybe in another video for this class, that a donut, right? The donut itself is the positive space. The donut hole is a negative shape, and then it belongs to the negative space, which is also what's around the donut. Okay, so negative is inside and out, what's not there, and the donut itself is the positive. Okay, and you can call these sometimes figure and ground, and you can also, that Rubens vase I showed a couple slides ago is what they call figure ground reversal, where depending on what you focus on, it looked like a face sometimes it looked like a vase. That is when the figure and ground, you can switch, because if you make it the figure a face, then the negative space is the vase, and then vice versa. If you're really focusing on the vase, the negative space looks like faces. Yeah, all that. Now, real quick, form and mass is basically the three-dimensional object or area occupied by a volume. It's basically the sense of things coming towards you, the height, width, and depth of something. It has all three. It's different than shape because it looks like it comes towards you or goes away from you. Form and mass are basically interchangeable. It's the 3Dness. Mass a lot of times refers to when it's solid, like the statue of David by Michelangelo. It's a solid form. It's not empty. Volume is sometimes referred to when you've got like a vase or some sort of form, a vessel where the interior is empty. And again, that's kind of like a three-dimensional negative space. That's a volume, right? Now, when you're talking about form with sculpture, that's obviously real space. It's the real sense of things going away from you. You can walk around it. You can see all the different ways it comes towards you, goes away from you. That's the light and shadows revealing this sense of form. And Yeah, that's how you see that it is 3D. Another word for this is in the round. Notice too, the sculpture, it's different from all angles. It has negative spaces or negative volumes inside of its wings, inside of its shape, all that kind of stuff. That is real 3D. But form, when you are talking about 2 dimensions, you need to remember it's always fake. It's not real. You are not seeing any real sense of space on a 2D drawing. It's all just to trick you, right? And we do this by using value and shape and sense of space and all those sorts of things. So to reiterate that, yeah, form on 2D is implied depth, to use that word again. Now, how do we imply that? This is to give you the last element I want to talk about here, value. Value, we've already talked a lot about, is shadow and light. You should know this already, but I just want to reiterate, I use photography as an example here, that when we look at a photograph that is black and white, we see all the shapes, we see all the forms strictly because of the shadow and light. The light or dark value of it, the middle tones give you the sense of like, okay, this is a darker sheet than the solid white faces, right? And as you get further, down below where the light is hitting, there may be a transitional value. So it goes from light gray to darker gray to black, like all that sort of stuff. That is all value. And we see all that, all the texture and masses / forms, it's all because of the way of the light and shadows model them or give them 3-dimensional appearance. So that's to reiterate that value is what creates that. And so to give a sense of 3-dimensionality to your drawings, you have to use value. It is absolutely essential that you use the lightness and darkness of the object being drawn to express the sense of depth, right? The sense of realism or naturalism. And it should go from white to gray to black. We're not talking about just white and black, right? That's not what value is. That is all of the lights and shadows in between. It's the shading. Without value to show light, you don't see this sense of depth. Okay, placing without value shows light or implied light. So basically, wow, that's a really poorly constructed sentence. Uh, just to reiterate here, and we'll explain in a second, to get the light in a drawing, you actually have to just leave things empty, right? Especially if you're on like and I say that when you're drawing on white paper, when you draw the shadows, that creates the shadow, but it's only a shadow if you leave the light. So it's not just thinking about where shadows are. You also have to think about where the light is hitting the objects and where you see that. Now, this slide is to really iterate that you can use line to create a sense of math. You can mass, right? Or form. You can build up dots. You can build up lines. They can hatch, which means they go all in the same direction, or cross hatch, which means they crisscross, right? And the more lines you have, they can also scribble over each other. The more lines you have, the darker the value, so it looks like it's more shadow, right? The middle tones have fewer lines, right? So you see some white paper coming between the lines, so it gives you a sense of gray. And then the blank white paper is the brightest light. Now, to really quickly blow your mind, if you ever want to play around and have some fun, like kind of side stuff, if you're in my class last semester, you can flip this and get black paper and white chalk, where you will actually practice drawing the light and leaving the black paper as a shadow. Great value exercise, but that's for another thing. This is really just to reiterate that you can use line to build up a sense of shape or a sense of form. Sorry. Shape is just flat. Remember, all these things have the form is coming towards you, going away. But also remember, you only get a sense of shadow if you leave the sense of light, and you have to be consistent with your light source, which is where all the light is hitting, right? Be consistent, leave where the light is. You have to think about this when drawing gestures. Even if it's very quickly, you have to remember it. Okay, that's enough reiteration of those elements. Let's talk about what your final project is going to be for this whole gesture line shape assignment. So first of all, what I want you to do is look here at these words and pick 6 of them. You will pick 6 descriptive or expressive words from either of these 2 lists. There's lots of them because I want you to be able to have lots to pick from. Now, some of them are very basic. Some of them might seem like a disillusioned. How are you going to draw that? I don't know. You figure it out. But you got a lot to pick from. So look at it. Then once you pick them, what my plan is for you to do is you're going to draw 2 gestures for each word that express or show that emotion. 2 gestures for each word that you picked, and they will express that emotion, feeling, or action. Now, these are fully fledged finished gestures. I want these to be pretty long-term gestures. I have a thing in a minute where we talk about the requirements of the gestures, but just to reiterate, these are finished. They're pretty long, and you're also going to have some warm-ups to do. But in any case, we'll get to that in a second. I do want to reiterate that in these gestures, the content should not be what expresses the word. I don't want you well, let me say that in a second. The content should be what expresses the word. The mark making should be what conveys the mood or feeling. The content should not be what expresses the word. The mark making should convey the mood or feeling. I do not want you to draw a cat and say that is adorable. I saw adorable as one of the words. You can't just draw a cat and be like, it's adorable, right? No, I don't want that. I want you to make bouncy, curvy, or soft lines for a word like adorable. I want you to think about the marks that you make, not the thing you're drawing. If you think attractive, don't just draw a pretty boy or girl when you pick the word attractive. You have to make the lines, the mark making, give you the sense of attractiveness, especially in a gesture, because you're not going to be able to finish and get it super tight anyway. But yeah, just remember, content should not be what expresses a word. The mark making should. Got it? You will have 12 fully finished gestures by the end of this. Just to reiterate, there's 2 for each of your original 6 words. You can use pencil, pen, charcoal, marker, ink, watercolor, whatever. I do want it to be mostly monochromatic. I don't want you to get too far into colors and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's pretty open to you. I don't want you to just use pencil, though, the whole time. Get some other things in there. Get some pen, get some charcoal, get a range of media done. Okay. Further requirements. As always, I don't have to read this word for word, but look at something. Look at objects and figures. Don't ever draw from your head for this assignment. I don't want you to do that. It creates bad habits and it defeats the purpose of gesture drawing. Gesture drawing is all about observation. Ideally, draw from life using your friends, pets, things around your home. Look at it in real life. But if you have to use pictures, that's fine. There's a lot of sources for looking at pictures of real life things. Line of action, as you guys already know, is a personal favorite. Oh, also, don't draw from drawings. I do not want to see you drawing something that has already been a gesture that I found, looking through Google for gestures, okay? Don't draw from your head or from a drawing, okay? Look at the real thing, change it into a drawing of your style. Now, don't avoid redrawing gestures that you don't feel express the word they were based on. It may take drawing more than 12 to get the right 12, to get your best 12. Just reiterating that as well. It doesn't take that long, 4 to 10 minutes. You can go ahead and do it again if it doesn't express the term, if you don't feel like it's right. So, further requirements. I know there's a lot here, but let me dig into them. You must warm up with a couple shorter gestures, 1 to 2 minutes or under before each drawing session, and I want you to include your warm-ups in the final upload. Basically, I will expect warm-ups. They don't count towards your final 12, but they will be part of the rubric. Just a few points. I just want to see that you warmed up. They don't have to be perfect. I just want to see that you did it. The final 12 expressive word inspired gestures need to all be between 4 to 10 minute studies, basically from normal length, like kind of long gesture, to an extended gesture, give or take a couple minutes. Don't get super caught up on time. Put in effort. Don't rush, but also remember it doesn't have to be fully fleshed out or representational. Basically, I don't want you to stress too much. If it takes you 12 minutes, that's fine. Now, I don't want you to get done in 2 minutes. Yeah, that really won't work. But if you want to take longer than 10, that's fine. Just don't take 2 hours. That's too much. 8 of your final gestures should be on 9 by 12 sketchbook paper each, right? So like fill up a sketchbook size piece of paper for 8 of them. And then the other 4, I want you to draw on large paper, which also means when you take the photograph, be sure that you kind of include the whole drawing pad. Okay, I want to see the whole thing. So yeah, 8 regular sketchbook size, 4 larger than sketchbook size. And that gets you your whole 12. Now, 4 of your drawings must be non-animate, meaning they're not people. Okay, they're objects, they're things that are just sitting, still lives, basically. Another 2 may be non-human animate. So I'm talking animals, dogs, cats, whatever. Those are fine. But only 2. So that's 6. The other 6 must be humans drawn from observations. You have to look at real life. I also want 2 of your drawings to include the setting and or an interaction of 2 or more figures. So 2 of your 10 have to show multiple people or the place where they are, the thing the thing they're on, what's in the background, all that sort of stuff. I want it to be fully finished out for two of them. The other four humans or whatever, however you set it up, I don't want you to, if you want to do a human and a dog for one of these, that kind of fits multiple things, right? There's a lot of overlap here, and whichever one you're drawing can be whichever size, as long as 8 are sketchbook, 4 are large, 4 are non-animate, 2 are, if you want, animals, 6 humans, right? Okay, all this should fit into your 12 possible options. Then I want you to take photos of everything and please place them onto a single Docker PDF. I've already asked you this before. Hopefully that's not a problem. I haven't seen any trouble with it, so keep that up, please. Please label each drawing with the corresponding expressive word. I want to see what you're trying to express, and I want you to tell me the word. Ideally, maybe you won't have to, but like you wouldn't have to in an art piece, for a show or something. But for this, I want you to label it so I can see what you were kind of thinking of working on. Do not upload individual photos. I've already said this. The due date is on Canvas. Let me go ahead and stop sharing so that we can look at, okay, 35 minutes. I've got to do one, just real quickly, let me show you the assignment on Canvas. So in assignments, you can see it. I just want to reiterate it here. It's literally like copied and pasted as far as the expectations are copied and pasted from the slides. You can reread them there. Yeah, literally everything is already here. Content should not express a word, right? All that kind of stuff. All that turn in as a single document, and it reiterates it is due next Thursday, 2/9 at midnight. So you have a full week to draw these 12 gestures. Also remember your warm-ups, include all that. You're going to upload it here as a file upload. Put your warm-ups on that single document as well. Yeah, all that's there. Let me know if you have any questions about all that. Pretty much, I'm going to add this video into here, so this might look a little different to you now. But it's also all in Pages. Just want to make sure you see that that is going to be there. The slideshow as well as this video will be here. Again, yeah, it's going to look a little different when you see it. Yeah, because I'll have the video linked. But in any case, it's all there. We'll get to work on this. Let me know if you have any questions. I hope you enjoy it. Sorry that was so much content, but it is important for you to reiterate and kind of remember all these elements. But, obviously the important part is getting to that final or major project final there at the end. But in any case, email me if you have any questions, and we will talk to you later.